This video is a follow-up to a post I made on one of my sites, which is www.compileswift.com, which is my dedicated site to Swift and related technologies, where we can learn them together. So in this video we're going to cover the basics of functions and how you create and use those in Swift. So let's get started. In the post on compileswift.com, I used the approach of someone who was also wanting to learn, who understood programming but perhaps was not that familiar with all the concepts. So I started from the very basics, and that's what we're going to do here. And to get the idea of functions across in Swift, I used this concept of a dishwasher. So you can see that I've got a starting playground here, a Swift playground in Xcode 6 beta 4, and I'm just going to get rid of this line, we don't need this here, and I'm going to paste in some comments. And so the idea here is, this is some pseudo code. We're going to create a function called dishwasher. We're going to give it a parameter, which would be a list, an array of items to clean. And it's going to create a new list, and each item that it's cleaned, it's going to add it to that list and then return the list to us at the end of it. So to use the function, we would obviously just call the function name dishwasher and pass in an array of dirty items, this list. Swift is a little unusual in that when you're defining functions, or methods as they're called in a class, you actually use the func keyword. Normally you'll see something like function or something like that, but for whatever reason they went with func. So it's func followed by the name you want to use, which will be camel case. So in this case we'll use dishwasher. Notice then we've got the lowercase d and the uppercase w. And at the moment it'll take no arguments, and we'll put the curly braces in. So we have an empty function right now that does nothing. So we know from our pseudocode above that what we want to do is eventually we want to return a new array with the list of cleaned items. And the way you tell the function to do that is to use the minus and then greater sign, and we're going to say, you're going to return to me an array, and it's going to be an array of strings, and that's how we tell it to do that. So you can see, of course, that the errors start here. If I click on here, you'll see it's missing return in a function expected to return a string array. So let's make it happy. Obviously we're expecting to return something. So we're going to tell it, what we'll do is we'll create a new variable. We'll call it call it the clean items. That's our list of items after they've been cleaned. And we're going to say it's a string array, so that obviously it matches what's expected above. And so that's how we do that. So it's empty right now, it's got no values, that's why we put the semicolon at the end. And of course what we have to do, let's make a little space for our other code. So now of course we have to return the clean items. So you'll see the error goes away, and now this function is happy. So right now if we were to call it, it wouldn't actually do anything. The next step of course is we also want it to take an argument, a parameter, as the incoming list of dirty items. So let's go ahead and set that up. We'll give it a name, we'll call it dirty items, and we know that it's going to be of a type that's going to be a string array, so we'll put that in there, and that's all we need to do. So now we can accept a list. We've got a variable that will create the new list and we'll return it. So now we have the basic skeleton of the function set up and defined here. We actually need to put something in the middle to generate our clean items and to add them to that new list of the array and to return it to us. So to do that, we're just going to use a simple loop. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, for dirty item in the dirty items array, I want it to do something. So in this case, what I'm going to have it do, we'll just put a comment here and say, magic happens and everything is clean. So let's just assume that the item gets cleaned here. So now that we need to add it to the clean items array, and to do that, we just simply say clean items, add in your next available empty slot the dirty item, and that's all we need to do. That'll be added to the array and return to us at the end. So let's just clean this spacing up here. And that's the basics of our function. Alright, so let's go ahead and try this out. So to do that, we need to have an array, a list of dirty items. So let's create that variable. Let's say let my dirty list equal, and it's an array of strings, remember. So we'll add a plate, a cup, and a saucer. So that's our array of dirty items. And now we're going to say a new variable, let my clean list equal, and we're going to call the dishwasher function, and it's expecting the argument here. So we're going to say my dirty list. Let's pass in that list that we just created. And there you have it. So if you look at the right hand side here, you can see what's happened is we've created the first variable, which is our my dirty list, and it's listed the contents here, plate, cup, and saucer. We then created a new variable which called the dishwasher function up here, passing in that list, and you can see that it returned plate, cup, and saucer. So they may look the same, but that's actually the returned list. What we can do here to make this a little clearer, if you're not quite sure what you're seeing, is I'm just going to go here and I'm going to add a string in front of the plate, cup, and saucer, basically each item as it gets cleaned and is added to the clean items array. So we could just say, just to clarify, these have been cleaned. So now when it runs, you can see, I think this makes it a little clearer, we've got a cleaned plate, a cleaned cup, and a cleaned saucer. So they are indeed the ones that have been cleaned and returned to us, and they're not the original ones. So that's sort of the basics there. Let's move on to some different things. Let's take a look at default values in the parameters and what that means. So let's start with a clean slate here and start over on some new code. So what is a default value in a parameter? Well, there may be times when you don't have what you need. You don't have the argument that you need to pass to the function. And this can of course cause a bad effect within the code, and you could have app crashes or all sorts of problems. So one way around that is to give something a default value. So let's go over that, and I'll give you a quick basic example. So to demonstrate this, let's create a very simple function. It'll just return a string, and it's going to be called hello2. The argument will be name, and it's going to be a string. And like I say, it's going to return a string back to us. And we're just going to do something in here. We'll just say return hello there. And then we'll just put the name that gets thrown in on the end as the argument to the function. So let's go ahead and try it. But let's do it this way. First of all, let's give it no arguments. Well, as we would expect, it's going to complain with an error. It's going to say missing argument for parameter number 1 in call, because quite rightly we should be giving it an argument. So let's do that. So let's just say, let's put my name, let's just say Peter. What happens now? Sure enough, it returns hello there Peter. It's concatenating my name onto the end of the string. But what if I don't know the name? Or what if it's some other parameter that I don't know at this time? So we can use a default. And so what we can do is, at this point, we can call it with no parameters because we don't know what it's going to be. And up here, we can actually say that the default will be a stranger. So now when you call it, notice what happens is because we didn't supply the argument for the name, it fills in the default one, this string of stranger. So when we call it, it doesn't generate an error. It actually comes back and says, hello there, stranger. And just to show that everything's working fine, we'll make the original call here, and you'll notice something a little different. I'm going to say, yep, sure enough, the name, and it's going to be Peter. I'm going to use it here and specify the name, and this will make sense in a little bit, but you can see what's happened. The first one with no argument is hello there, stranger. Because we supplied an argument for this parameter called name, we've actually given the parameter a name here of name, and we've said that the value for that is going to be Peter. It actually replaces the default with the one that we've passed. So I think that gives you an idea there of why you may want to be looking to use this for certain scenarios. But there's a bonus, right? I mean, how often are you going to just send one parameter? Most of the time we send multiple parameters. So let's now take a look at how we deal with that situation. So I think you're going to like this. What we do is we separate each of the parameters, the arguments, with a comma. So I'm going to add a new one on here, and I'm going to say this one's the greeting. And again, it's going to be a string. And let's give it a default value. Why not? We can go ahead and do that. So we'll say welcome. Let's be nice by default. How about that? So at the moment, it's not going to do anything extra because we're not actually using that extra greeting. So let's concatenate that onto the end of the string. Let's add a space. And then we'll add the greeting. So now you can see it says, hello there, stranger, welcome. And hello there, Peter, welcome. But that's kind of boring, right? I mean, we're using the default, but nothing else. So let's test out a few scenarios and see what happens. Let's add an argument here of greeting to this call. And I'm going to say, go away. So as we expect, we've now overridden both of the defaults. So sure enough, hello there, Peter, go away. Isn't it nice and polite? Let's try another one. What about if we don't supply one of the parameters? So let's not supply the name this time, and you'll see why naming is important here for the parameters. So instead of putting name at the beginning, let's just put a greeting, and we'll say that the greeting is, let's say, come on in. How about that? Now in some languages, you'd have a problem at this point because the first argument, greeting, is not the one up here in the list. The first argument is name, but because we named them greeting, and we've got it here, greeting, it's assigning greeting to greeting and using the default for name. So think about that for a second. Look what's happening on the right here, okay? Hello there, stranger, because we didn't supply a name argument. Come on in, because we did supply a greeting, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Now, here's something else. What about if we do them backwards? Well, it'll allow for that too, because again, we named everything. So let's just save some typing here. Let's take the greeting that we've got here, paste that in. But what about if we put the name afterwards? Well, it's not a problem, right? Because they've got names, so it knows what's going on. In fact, let's change this to Paul. So again, we've satisfied the greeting and we've satisfied the name. It doesn't matter that they're the other way around. It still comes back, hello there, Paul, come on in. So you can see the advantage to naming your parameters there. But there's also something else. There's another bonus, one more thing. In Swift, it has, and you'll hear this pronounced different ways. You'll hear these pronounced tuples or tuples, lots of different arguments at the moment as to which way it is. I'm just going to go with tuple for now, and you can all correct me when it turns out to be wrong later, or maybe I'm right and the others are wrong, who knows. So it's a tuple or a tuple. But what is it? Well, it allows you to return multiple values. Now this is something unusual and something different to most languages that perhaps most of you have used. So let's go have a look at this, and I'll explain what's going on there and why this is so super useful. So I've cleaned all the code so we can start again with a clean slate. So what is this tuple or tuple that everyone's talking about, and why is it so popular, and why is everyone so excited? Well, let me show you why. Let's create a basic function. What it allows you to do is return multiple values in the return. Now in other languages, in my case, for example, I wrote a lot of ActionScript 3. If you wanted to return multiple values, you had to find some creative way to do it. So in my case, I would create a temporary object. I would store whatever those values are that I wanted to return in the object. And then on the other end, I would decompose the object and break out all the values that I wanted. Well, thanks to Swift, we can use this tuple or tuple to directly return those values and work with them. So let's go ahead and look. We'll set up a basic function, and I'm just going to call it my function. And it's not going to take any arguments on this one. I think you've got the hang of that by now. But of course, we are going to do some returns. But look at the way we do this, right? First of all, I'm going to give them a name to make it easy to access them later on. So I'm going to say data item, and the first return is a string. I'm going to put a comma, and then I'm going to say data value. And the second return is going to be an integer, okay? So stay with me here, it'll make sense. And I'm just going to directly return them. I'm not going to put any fancy code in, we don't care about that. It's all about the return on this particular part of the video. So we're going to return a data item, which is a string with age, and a data value, which is an integer of 50, and that's all it's going to do. So let's go ahead and call it and see what it does. Let's create a new variable to store the returns. So let my return equal the call, right, to my function. Okay, so you can automatically see over here that my return now has, you can see the values coming back, but let's make it even clearer, right? So we've got this variable called my return. So let's take that and now look at the data item, right? Look at that, age. Well, what about the other one? My return, and it's going to be data value this time, 50. So by just using this my return.data item and my return.data value, I can directly get at those multiple returns thanks to tuples or tuples. And so that's what that is. There is so much more we can cover on functions or methods in Swift, but this is the basics, and hopefully it gives you an idea to get started, or if you're coming from another language, it gives you an idea of some of the syntax differences. If you're at all curious to learn more, I recommend looking at the Apple developer documentation. Clearly everything is in beta right now still, so it's liable to change before the final release, but I have been putting a lot of posts up on my dedicated Swift site, which is www.compileswift.com. It is mine, it is part of the uibuzz.com network that I have, and this video will appear on both, but check out compileswift.com for posts on other subjects like closures and lots of other things that we'll be covering. So I hope this helped you, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you.